Silver Creek was waiting for a wedding. White flowers hung on the chapel fence. Wagons filled the dusty street. People stood in their best clothes and whispered Clara Whitmore's name with envy. They said she was lucky. She was about to marry Edward Langley, the richest man in the valley. He owned cattle, stores, and land. He also owned the debts of half the town, including the debt of Clara's father. Everyone believed this marriage would save the Whitmore ranch, but Clara stood behind the chapel door with fear in her chest. Edward smiled like a gentleman in public. He kissed hands and spoke softly when people watched. But when he was alone with Clara, his voice changed. He told her where she would live, who she could see, and how she would obey him after the wedding. He called it protection. Clara knew it was a cage. A quiet knock came at the door. A young servant girl stepped inside. Her name was Elsie, and she worked in Edward's house. Her face was pale. "Miss Clara," she whispered, "I was told to burn this." She pushed a folded letter into Clara's hand. "Read it before you walk to the altar." Then she ran out. Clara opened the letter with trembling fingers. It was written by Edward himself. The words stole the breath from her body. Edward had made a secret agreement with the banker. After the wedding, Clara's father would lose the last part of his land. Clara would be taken to Edward's estate, far from town, far from help, far from anyone who loved her. The last line was worse than all the others. A frightened bride is easier to control than a proud woman. Clara pressed the letter against her. Herta knock came again. Her father entered, in his old black coat. His eyes were wet with pride. "They are ready, my child." Clara almost showed him the letter. But through the window, she saw Edward near the chapel steps. Two of his men stood close to the door, watching like guards. This was not a wedding. It was a trap. Clara forced a smile. "Give me one moment to pray." "Father." When he left, she moved fast. She tore the long train from her dress so she could run. She took a small pouch from beneath the floorboard. Inside were a few coins, her mother's ring and a silver cross. Then she climbed out the back window. Her dress ripped on a nail, but she did not stop. She ran behind the chapel and reached the stable. Her mare willow stood in the shade. The stable boys stared at her. "Miss Clara, please." Tom, say nothing. He saw the fear in her face and helped her mount. Clara rode out without a saddle. At first, no one noticed. Then a woman screamed. Edward stepped into the sunlight just as Clara reached the edge of town. Their eyes met across the dust. His smile vanished. "Bring her back," he shouted. Clara kicked Willow harder. The mare raced past the last houses and into the wild land. Behind her, the wedding bell began to ring. It did not sound like joy anymore. It sounded like warning. By sunset, storm clouds covered the mountains. Clara did not know the country ahead. She had been taught to fear it. She had heard stories of outlaws, wolves, and Apache warriors. But the danger behind her had a name: Edward Langley. Rain began to fall. Thunder rolled across the valley. Willow slipped on wet stone. Lightning cracked above them, and the mare reared. Clara fell hard. Pain burned through her ankle. Mud covered her dress. Willow vanished into the storm. Night came quickly. Clara dragged herself beneath a twisted cedar tree, shaking from cold and fear. Then she heard footsteps. A tall figure appeared between the trees. He carried a bow. His dark hair was wet from the rain. His shoulders were broad, his face calm and strong. An Apache warrior. "Please," Clara whispered. "Do not hurt me." The warrior stopped and lowered his bow. "I did not come to hurt you." "Who are you?" "Naiche." List. A blanket near her. "Storm returns before morning. You cannot stay here." Clara tried to stand, but pain shot through her leg. Nate caught her gently. Then they both heard horses in the distance. Men's voices followed. Edward had found her trail. Nate looked toward the valley. Those men are hunting you. Yes. Clara whispered Dot. Do you want to go with them, Dot? No, Dot, Naic. E wrapped the blanket around her. Shoulders, Dot, then come with me, Dot. Clara looked at the Apache warrior she had been taught to fear. Then she looked toward the men sent by the man everyone told her to trust, Dot, at that moment. She understood, Dot, not every monster came from the wilderness. Some waited beside an altar. She took Nature's hand. Before Edward's riders reached the cedar tree, the runaway bride and the Apache warrior disappeared into the dark mountains. Clara followed Nate into the mountains without knowing where he was taking her. The rain continued through the night. Her injured ankle made every step painful. More than once she stumbled on the rocky ground. Each time, Nate caught her before she fell. Neither of them spoke much. Behind them, distant voices echoed through the darkness. Edward's men were still searching. Nate listened carefully to every sound carried by the wind. They are getting closer. He finally said. Fear tightened around Clara's chest. Will they find us? Not tonight. His confidence surprised her. After another hour, they reached a narrow canyon hidden between tall cliffs. At the end stood a small wooden cabin beside a stream. It was simple but strong. Smoke stains darkened the stone chimney. Firewood was stacked neatly beside the wall. Nate opened the door. You are safe here. Clara hesitated before stepping inside. The cabin was warmer than she expected. A fire pit stood in the center. Shelves held dried herbs, tools, and blankets. Everything was clean and organized. This is your home. She asked. Yes. You live here alone. For a moment, Nate said nothing. Then he nodded. Alone. There was something in his eyes that reminded Clara of her own loneliness. Nate placed more wood on the fire and handed her a blanket. Sit. Clara lowered herself onto a chair and winced in pain. Nate knelt beside her injured ankle. May I look at it? She hesitated. Every story she had heard about Apache warriors returned to her mind. Yet this man had saved her life. Slowly, she nodded. Naiche carefully removed her muddy boot. The ankle was swollen badly. You cannot walk far for several days. He said, That is wonderful news. For the first time, a faint smile appeared on Nate's face. It was the first smile Clara had seen from him. He crushed several herbs and wrapped them around her ankle. The pain slowly eased. Thank you. Clara said. You thanked me before. You do not need to keep doing it. Maybe I do. Naice. He looked away. The cabin fell silent again. Outside, the storm continued. Clara watched him move around the room. He repaired a leather strap. He checked the fire. He worked with calm confidence. Nothing about him matched the stories she had grown up hearing. You saved me, she said softly. Nate shrugged. Anyone would have done the same. No, Edward would not have. The moment the words escaped her mouth, Clara regretted them. Nate looked at her. Edward is the man you ran from. Yes. Your husband. Not my husband. Her voice hardened. Left before the wedding. Naiche. Nodded but asked no questions. Most men would have. Most men would want a story. Instead, he respected her silence. Hours passed. Near midnight, a sound came from outside. Horse hooves. Both Clara and Nate froze. The Apache warrior moved instantly. He grabbed his bow and crossed the room. Azil. Hooves stopped somewhere beyond the trees. Then came voices. Edward's. Men. Clara's heart began pounding. They found us. Naich. He stepped toward the window. No. Not yet. The voices drifted through the darkness. The riders were close enough to be dangerous, but too far away to see the cabin. One of the men shouted Clara's name. Another cursed the storm. They searched for nearly an hour before finally riding away. Only when the sounds disappeared did Clara breathe again. Naiche lowered his bow. They will return tomorrow. Clara looked into the fire. Then I should leave. No. The answer came immediately. If you leave now, they will find you. Why would you help me? Naiche stared into the flames. Because someone once helped me when I needed it. Clara sensed there was a story behind those words, a painful one, but she did not ask. Outside, the storm finally began to fade. Inside the cabin, silence returned. For the first time since fleeing the wedding, Clara felt safe. She wrapped the blanket around herself and closed her eyes. Across the room, Naiche remained awake, watching the darkness beyond the window. Neither of them knew it yet, but the choice Clara had made at the altar was about to change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of running water. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she saw the wooden walls of the cabin and remembered everything. The wedding, the letter, the escape, the storm. Naiche. She sat up slowly. Her ankles still hurt, but not as much as before. The cabin was empty. Naiche had already left. Clara wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and looked outside. Morning sunlight covered the mountains. The storm was gone. Birds moved through the trees. The stream beside the cabin sparkled under the rising sun. For the first time in many months, the world felt peaceful. A few minutes later, Naiche appeared from the forest carrying 2 rabbits. You hunt early, Clara said. The mountains wake early. He placed the rabbits outside and entered the cabin. How is your ankle? Better. Good. That was all he said. Clara almost laughed. Naiche was probably the quietest man she had ever met. Later that morning, while he worked outside repairing part of the roof, Clara sat near the doorway watching him. Everything he did seemed calm and deliberate. Edward always rushed through things. He gave orders and expected others to obey. Naiche never ordered anyone. He simply worked. After a while, Clara spoke. Have you lived here long? Several years. Always alone. Naiche continued working. Not always. The answer caught Clara's attention. She waited. Eventually, he climbed down from the roof. I had a wife once. Clara looked at him with surprise. Naiche stared toward the mountains. There was sickness. Many people died. She was one of them. His voice remained calm, but Clara could feel the pain beneath the words. I am sorry. He nodded. I thought I would never care about anyone again. Silence settled between them. Clara understood that feeling. After her mother died, part of her father disappeared as well. He continued living, but the happiness left his eyes. Loss changed people. Sometimes forever. That afternoon, Naiche showed Clara a path leading to the stream. You should move your ankle a little each day. So now you are a healer too. Small smile touched his face. No, just someone who listens to old healers. They spent most of the day talking. Not about painful things. Simple things. Favorite seasons. Childhood memories. The mountains. The river. For the first time in years, Clara felt like someone was listening to her instead of speaking for her. As the sun began to set, she noticed movement near the trees. A horse. Then another. Her heart immediately froze. Naiche saw them too. He grabbed his bow. Stay inside. 3 riders appeared on a ridge overlooking the valley. Edward's men. They were Searching again. One rider pointed toward the stream. Another pointed toward the mountains behind the cabin. Clara stepped backward. They are getting closer. Nate nodded. Yes. Will they find us? Not today. His confidence was reassuring. But Clara could see concern in his eyes. The search was becoming more dangerous. The riders remained on the ridge for several minutes before turning away. When they finally disappeared, Clara released a breath she had been holding. Edward will never stop, she said. No. Because he thinks he owns me. Nate looked directly at her. No one owns another person. The words hit Clara harder than she expected. Edward had spent months making her feel like an object, a possession, something to control. Yet this man, who barely knew her, understood something Edward never would. As darkness settled over the mountains, they sat beside the fire. The cabin felt warmer than before. Safer. Outside, wolves howled somewhere in the distance. Inside, the fire crackled softly. Clara looked across the flames at an IIC-8. He seemed different now. Frightening. Not mysterious. Simply lonely. Very much like her. Then a thought entered her mind. A dangerous thought. For the first time since arriving, she realized she was no longer thinking about how to leave. She was thinking about how long she could stay, and that realization frightened her more than Edward's riders ever could. The following morning, Clara decided she was tired of being afraid. Her ankle was healing. The swelling had gone down, and she could walk short distances without much pain. Nate noticed immediately. You move better today. I am tired of sitting inside. That is a good sign. Clara smiled. During the past few days, something had changed between them. The silence that once felt uncomfortable now felt natural. They no longer searched for words. Sometimes they simply sat beside the stream and listened to the water. For Clara, it was a strange feeling. She had spent most of her life surrounded by people who always wanted something from her: advice, obedience, agreement. Nate wanted none of those things. He simply accepted her presence. That afternoon, he took her farther into the mountains. The trail climbed through tall pine trees before opening onto a ridge overlooking the valley below. Clara stopped. The view was breathtaking. Green forests stretched toward distant hills. Sunlight touched the river far below. Eagles circled high above the cliffs. It is beautiful, she whispered. Nate nodded. This place helped me survive after your wife died. Yes. Clara looked at him. Do you still miss her? Every day. The honesty surprised her. Most people hid their pain. Nate never did. He simply carried it. For a while, neither spoke. Then Clara sat on a large rock and looked out across the valley. I miss my mother. Nate sat beside her. Tell me about her. The request warmed her heart. Very few people had ever asked. She spent nearly an hour telling stories about her childhood, her mother's laughter, her kindness, the songs she used to sing while cooking. Nate listened quietly. When Clara finished, she realized she was smiling. You still love talking about her, because she was wonderful. Then keep talking about her. The simple wisdom made Clara laugh. For the first time in years, speaking about her mother no longer felt painful. As the afternoon faded, they began walking back toward the cabin. That was when Nate suddenly stopped. His expression changed instantly. What is it? Clara asked. Tracks. He crouched beside the trail. Fresh horse tracks. Several riders. Very recent. Clara's stomach tightened. Edward. Maybe. Naiche stood. We need to leave. They moved quickly through the forest. The peaceful afternoon disappeared. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was already dropping behind the mountains. Naiche gathered supplies, food, blankets, water. Clara watched him. Are we leaving? For a few days. They are. Searching closer than before. A distant gunshot echoed through the valley. Clara froze. Another shot followed. Then another. Nate looked toward the sound. Someone is driving animals through the forest. Why? To force us out. Fear returned to Clara's chest. Edward was becoming desperate. Night fell before they finished preparing. They left the cabin and followed a hidden trail deeper into the mountains. Hours later, they reached a narrow cave overlooking a canyon. Naiche lit a small fire. The cave was safe and hidden. Clara sat near the entrance, watching the stars appear above the dark cliffs. She felt exhausted and strangely disappointed. The cabin had started to feel like home. You are thinking about something, Nate said. Clara smiled. You notice everything. Not everything. Most things. She looked into the fire. I was just thinking that I did not want to leave the cabin. Neither did I. The answer surprised both of them. For a moment, silence filled the cave. Then their eyes met. Neither looked away. Something new had peered between them, something neither wanted to name. Not yet. A cold wind entered the cave. Without thinking, Nate moved closer and placed another blanket around Clara's shoulders. Their hands touched briefly. A simple touch. Yet Clara felt her heart beat faster. She turned toward the fire before he could notice. Outside, the mountains slept beneath the stars. Inside the cave, two lonely people sat together beside a small flame. Neither spoke, but both understood that the distance between them was slowly disappearing. Far below, Edward's riders continued their search through the darkness. And for the first time, Clara feared losing more than her freedom. She feared losing Naiche. The sun rose slowly over the mountains. Clara woke before Naiche. For several minutes, she sat near the entrance of the cave, watching the valley below. Morning mist covered the trees. The world looked peaceful. It was hard to believe that men were searching for her. Harder still to believe that only a few days earlier she had been standing in a wedding dress. Her life felt completely different now. Behind her, Nate stirred awake. Did you sleep? He asked. A little. You were thinking. Clara smiled. How do you always know? Because I do the same thing. They shared a quiet laugh. It was a small moment, but it felt important. The fear that once existed between them was gone. After a simple breakfast, they began the journey back toward the cabin. Nate moved carefully through the forest, studying every sign around them. When they finally reached the clearing, both stopped. The cabin still stood, but something was wrong. The front door was open. Nate's expression hardened. Stay here. He moved forward silently. Clara waited among the trees. A few minutes later, Nate signaled for her to come. The cabin had been searched. Blankets lay on the floor. Shelves had been overturned. Several supplies were missing. Edward's men. Clara whispered. Most likely. A wave of guilt washed over her. I brought this trouble here. No. Naiche. He looked directly at her. Edward brought the trouble, not you. Those words meant more to Clara than he realized. For years, people had blamed her whenever something went wrong. Naiche never did. The rest of the day was spent repairing the damage. Together they cleaned the cabin. Together they reorganized the supplies. As they worked, Clara found herself smiling more often than she had in years, near sunset. She stepped outside carrying a bucket of water. She stopped suddenly. A horse stood near the stream. Willow. Her mare had returned. Clara laughed and ran forward. Willow rubbed her nose against Clara's shoulder. I thought I lost you forever. Nate watched the reunion with amusement. The horse seemed stubborn, like her owner. Clara pretended to be offended. That is not very kind. It is true. For a moment, they simply stood there smiling at each other. Then the smiles slowly faded. Neither looked away. The air between them felt different. Warmer. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. A sudden voice shattered the moment. Clara. Both turned instantly. A man stood at the edge of the clearing. Clara's blood froze. Edward. He was alone. His clothes were dusty from travel, but his eyes burned with anger. Nate stepped in front of Clara immediately. Edward laughed. So the stories are true. You are hiding behind an Apache. I'm not hiding behind anyone, Clara said. Edward ignored her. He kept staring at Naiche. You have something that belongs to. Nate's face remained calm. She is not yours. The answer only made Edward angrier. You know nothing about her. I know. Enough. Edward's hand drifted toward the revolver at his side. Clara's heart pounded. Stop this. Edward finally looked at her. Come home. There was something desperate in his voice now. Not love. Possession. Come home, and we can forget this happened. Clara shook her head. No. His expression darkened. You are making a mistake. No. Edward, for the first time, I am correcting one. Silence filled the clearing. Edward stared at her for several seconds. Then his eyes shifted toward Naiche. This is not over. Nate did not move. No. Edward slowly backed away. Before leaving, he looked at Clara one final time. You will regret this. Then he disappeared into the trees. The moment he was gone, Clara released the breath she had been holding. Nate continued watching the forest. He will come back. Yes. And next time he will not come alone. The truth hung heavily between them. The danger was growing. Edward was no longer searching. Now he was preparing for war. That night, neither Clara nor Nate slept much. The future felt uncertain. Yet despite the fear, Clara knew one thing with absolute certainty. When Edward had demanded that she return with him, she had not hesitated. Not even for a second. Because somewhere during those days in the mountains, her heart had made a choice. And that choice was standing beside the fire only a few feet away. Naiche. Days that followed were filled with tension. Edward had found them once. Everyone knew he would return. Nate spent more time scouting the mountains. Every morning he left before sunrise and returned hours later. Clara could see the concern growing in his eyes. The search parties were becoming larger. Edward was gathering men from nearby towns. One evening, Nate returned later than usual. His expression alone told Clara something was wrong. How many this time? She asked. At least 12. Clara's stomach tightened. 12 men searching for 2 people. Edward was obsessed. He will never stop. She said quietly. No. The answer came without hesitation. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Clara made a decision. Maybe I should leave. Nate immediately looked at her. Leave where? Anywhere. If I go far enough, maybe he will stop hunting you. Nate stood. No. His voice was stronger than usual. Clara was surprised. Why not? Because you will not survive alone. I survived before. Barely. The truth stung because it was true. Clara looked away. Nate took a deep breath. This is not your burden alone anymore. The words settled heavily between them. Something in Clara's chest warmed. No one had ever stood beside her the way Nate did, not even when she was engaged, especially not then. The following morning, Clara accompanied Nate to gather water from the stream. The air was cool and fresh. For a short time, everything felt normal. Then Nate suddenly stopped walking. Someone is here. Clara froze. A young Apache boy emerged from the trees. He looked no older than 14. The boy smiled when he saw Naiche. Naiche. The warrior smiled. For the first time that day. Taza. The boy approached quickly. My grandfather sent me. His smile disappeared. There is trouble. Naiche listened carefully. Several settlers entered Apache territory 2 days ago. They are armed. Edward's men. Most likely, the boy nodded. They are offering money for information. Clara felt her heart sink. Edward was spreading his search everywhere. Naiche thanked the boy and gave him food for the journey home. When Taza finally left, Clara spoke. You have family nearby. Some. Why did you never tell me? Naiche shrugged. You never asked. Clara laughed softly. That was true. Later that afternoon, they climbed to a high ridge overlooking the valley. Smoke rose in the distance. Silver Creek. Clara stared silently at her hometown. For the first time since her escape, she could see it again. Do you miss it? Nate asked. She thought carefully before answering. I miss my father, but not the life I had there. Nate nodded. Your father loves you. I know. Then one day you should see him again. Clara looked at him. And if he hates me for running away, good father does not stop loving his child. The words touched her deeply. Without thinking, she reached for his hand. Nate looked surprised. Neither moved away. For a moment, the world seemed to disappear. The valley. The danger. Edward. Everything. There was only the warmth of his hand. Only the feeling neither of them could ignore any longer. Clara smiled. You know something. What? You are very different from the man I expected to find in these mountains. Naiche smiled slightly. And you are very different from the woman I expected to find in a wedding dress. Both laughed, and silence returned. Comfortable silence, the kind shared by people who understand each other. As the sun began to set, they started back toward the cabin. Neither noticed the rider watching from the distant trees. One of Edward's men. The rider had seen everything. He had seen the cabin. He had seen Clara. And most importantly, he had seen how much she cared about Naiche. The man immediately turned his horse and rode away toward Silver Creek, toward Edward, toward the storm that was about to descend upon both of their lives. That night, Clara sat beside the fire while Nate sharpened a hunting knife. For reasons she could not explain, she felt uneasy. Something is wrong, she said. Naiche looked up. Why? I do not know. I just feel it. Nate listened to the wind outside. His instincts told him the same thing. Neither of them slept much that night, and before the next sunset, they would learn that Edward Langley had finally found exactly what he was looking for. The next morning began quietly, too quietly. Nate noticed it first. The forest felt different. The birds were silent. Even the wind seemed cautious as it moved through the trees. Something was wrong. He stepped outside before sunrise and studied the mountains around the cabin. Nothing moved, yet his instincts refused to settle. When he returned inside, Clara was already awake. "You did not sleep," she said. "Neither did you." She smiled faintly. No, for several days. Both had lived with the same fear. Edward was getting closer. It was only a matter of time before he made his next move. After breakfast, Nate saddled Willow. "Why are you preparing the horse?" Clara asked. "If trouble comes, I want you ready to leave." Clara immediately shook her head. "I am not leaving without you." Nate looked at her. "You may not have a choice. I do." The firmness in her voice surprised him. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Nate nodded. "Very well." The morning passed peacefully. By noon, Clara was gathering firewood behind the cabin when she heard something. A distant crack. Then another. Gunshots. She dropped the wood immediately. Nate appeared from the trees. Seconds later, inside. Now. More shots echoed through the valley. Then came the sound of horses. Many horses. Clara's heart began pounding. Edward. Nate grabbed his bow. "Stay hidden." "How many are there?" "Too many." The answer frightened her more than anything else. Nate moved to the window. Riders were appearing among the trees. 5. Then 7. Then more. Edward had brought nearly 20 men. They surrounded the clearing slowly. Like hunters closing a trap. Voice finally rang through the forest. "Clara." Edward. His voice carried across the clearing. "Come out, and no one gets hurt." Naiche remained silent. Edward laughed. "Do you really think that Apache can protect you forever?" Clara stepped beside Naiche. "I am not going with you." Edward's expression darkened. "You belong with me." No. For the first time, Clara felt no fear while saying it. "I never belonged to you." The silence that followed was dangerous. Then Edward smiled. A cold smile. "Very well." He raised one hand. Several men rode forward. Nature's jaw tightened. "Go. Out the back." Clara stared at him. No. Go." I said no. Their eyes met. And I-C-H-E understood something then. Clara was no longer the frightened bride who had fled Silver Creek. She had become stronger than even she realized. The first rider entered the clearing. Then another. Nate stepped outside. Edward watched from horseback. Move aside. Apache. Naiche calmly raised his bow. Leave. Edward laughed. "You are one man." Nate glanced briefly toward the mountains behind them. "Not exactly." A sharp whistle echoed through the valley. Then another. Edward's smile disappeared. Figures emerged from the trees. Apache. Warriors. 1. 3. 5. More appeared along the ridges overlooking the clearing. Every rifle and bow suddenly pointed toward Edward's men. The balance had changed instantly. Edward looked around in disbelief. Nate was not alone. The Apache warrior stepped forward. "You should leave." Several of Edward's men looked nervous. One slowly backed his horse away. Another lowered his rifle. Edward realized he could no longer win. Not today. His face burned with humiliation. This is not over. Nate said nothing. Edward stared at Clara. "You will regret choosing him." Clara stepped forward. No. "You regret that I did not choose you." The words struck harder than any weapon. Several of Edward's own men looked away in embarrassment. Edward turned his horse sharply. Retreat. One by one. The riders disappeared into the forest. The danger was gone. For now. As silence returned, an older Apache warrior approached Nate. He was tall and gray-haired. His eyes immediately settled on Clara. So this is the woman. Nate looked uncomfortable. The older warrior smiled. "I am Chayton, a friend." Clara introduced herself. Chayton studied them both. Then a knowing smile appeared on his face. "I see." Clara felt her cheeks grow warm. That evening, the Apache warriors shared a meal near the cabin before returning home. For the first time since her escape, Clara felt truly protected. After sunset, she sat beside the stream alone, the stars reflected on the water. A few moments later, Nate joined her. Neither spoke immediately. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "You called them for help." Yes. Because of me. Because of us. The answer made her heart race. Nate looked at the water. "I spent years alone after my wife died. I never expected anyone to enter my life again." Clara could barely breathe. "Neither did I." Slowly. Nate turned toward her. The distance between them seemed to disappear. Then he gently took her hand. This time neither pulled away. Above them, the stars filled the mountain sky. And for the first time, both allowed themselves to admit the truth. They were no longer running from danger together. They were falling in love. The days after Edward's retreat were the happiest Clara had known in years. For the first time since leaving Silver Creek, she was no longer living only from fear. She was living with hope. The mountains felt different now. The cabin felt different too. Every morning she and Nate shared breakfast beside the stream. Every evening they sat near the fire and talked for hours. Neither spoke openly about love. They no longer needed to. It was already there. One afternoon, Nate took Clara to a meadow hidden deep in the mountains. Wildflowers covered the valley floor, and sunlight painted the hills gold. Clara stopped in amazement. "It is beautiful. My wife loved this place," Nate said. The words surprised her. Naich. He rarely spoke about his past. Clara looked at him carefully. "Does it hurt to come here? Sometimes. Then why bring me? Naic. He was silent for several moments. "Because I wanted to share it with someone again." The answer touched Clara deeply. She reached for his hand. Nate squeezed it gently. For a long moment, they simply stood together beneath the afternoon sun. Then Clara smiled. "I think this is my favorite place in the world." Nate looked at her. Mine too. That evening they returned to the cabin happier than they had been in weeks. Neither noticed the rider watching them from a distant ridge. Edward's men had not stopped searching. They had simply become smarter. 2 days later, trouble arrived. A rider appeared carrying a white cloth tied to a stick. Message. Nate approached cautiously, while Clara remained near the cabin. The man handed over a folded paper. Then he immediately left. Nate opened it. His face darkened. Clara knew instantly something was wrong. "What is it?" Nate handed her the letter. Clara's hands trembled as she read. The message was from Edward. It was short. "If you do not return within 3 days, your father will lose everything." Clara felt her stomach drop. No. Edward had finally found a way to hurt her. Not through violence, through family. Tears filled her eyes. "My father." Nate placed a hand on her shoulder. "We will find a way." But Clara already knew the truth. Her father was old. The ranch was struggling. Edward controlled most of the debts in the valley. The threat was real. That night, Clara barely slept. Every terrible possibility ran through her mind. By morning, she had made a decision. "I have to go back." Nate immediately shook his head. "No. If I do not, my father will lose everything. We will help him." Another way. How? Neither had an answer. Silence filled the cabin. Finally, Clara looked at him. "I cannot let my father suffer because of me." Nate's jaw tightened. "And I cannot let you walk back into a prison." For the first time since they met, anger entered the conversation. Neither was angry with the other. They were angry with the situation. Hours passed. Neither changed their mind. Late that afternoon, Clara walked alone beside the stream. She felt trapped. No matter what choice she made, someone she loved would suffer. Then she heard hoofbeats. A familiar rider approached. It was Taza. The young Apache boy jumped from his horse. "I was looking for you." Why? The boy smiled. Because I have news. Good news. Clara and Nate exchanged confused looks. Taza continued. I was near Silver Creek yesterday. People are talking. Talking about what? Edward. The boy's smile widened. Apparently your father refused to sign the papers. Clara stared at him. What? He refused. Everyone knows. They argued in front of half the town. Hope flashed through Clara's heart. Are you sure? Taza nodded enthusiastically. Your father told Edward that his daughter was worth more than all the land in the valley. Clara felt tears filling her eyes. Her father. Despite everything, he had chosen her. Nate smiled for the first time all day. The burden lifting from Clara's shoulders was almost visible. Edward's threat had failed, but the news brought another realization. Edward was becoming more desperate, and desperate men often made dangerous decisions. That evening, as darkness settled over the mountains, Nate stood outside the cabin studying the horizon. Clara joined him. You are worried. Yes. Because of Edward. Yes. Clara slipped her hand into his. What do we do now? Nate looked toward the distant valley. We stopped running. The answer surprised her. Nate's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. For weeks, Edward had hunted them. For weeks they had hidden, but something had changed. The fear was gone. Now they were ready to fight for their future. And deep in Silver Creek, Edward Langley was preparing his final move. The following morning, Nate left before sunrise. This time he was not scouting. He was preparing. For weeks, he and Clara had hidden in the mountains while Edward searched for them. Now that Edward's threats had reached Clara's father, hiding was no longer enough. Something had to end. Clara found Nate standing on a ridge, overlooking the valley. You are thinking about him again. Nate nodded. Edward will not stop. No. He turned toward her. Neither will I. Those words brought Clara both comfort and fear. She knew Nate would do anything to protect her. That was exactly what worried her. I do not want anyone hurt. Because of me. Naic. He gently touched her hand. This stopped being only about you a long time ago. Before Clara could answer, the sound of horses echoed through the valley. Several riders were approaching. Nate immediately reached for his bow, but after a moment, he relaxed. Friends. A group of Apache warriors emerged from the trees. Chayton rode at the front. The older warrior dismounted and greeted them. We have news. His serious expression worried Clara. What happened? One of our scouts entered Silver Creek yesterday. Everyone listened carefully. Edward is gathering more men. Nate's face hardened. How many? At least 30. Clara's heart sank. 30 men. Edward was no longer searching. He was building an army. Chayton continued. He plans to come into the mountains. Tomorrow. Silence followed. Everyone understood what that meant. The final confrontation was approaching. That evening the cabin became a meeting place. Apache warriors arrived from nearby camps. Plans were discussed around the fire. Clara listened quietly. These men respected Naiche. They trusted him. Several times she caught herself looking at him. The lonely warrior she had met beneath a cedar tree was gone. Now she saw a leader, a man willing to stand between danger and the people he cared about. As darkness fell, the warriors left to prepare. Only Clara and Nate remained. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Clara broke the silence. What happens tomorrow? Naiche stared into the fire. I do not know. The honesty frightened her more than any lie could have. For the first time, uncertainty filled the room. Clara moved closer. Then promise me something. Nate looked at her. What? Come back. The simple words carried all the fear she had been hiding. Nate's expression softened. Slowly he reached into a small leather pouch hanging from his belt. He removed a carved pendant. It was old and worn. Smooth by time. My wife made this many years ago. Clara looked surprised. Naiche placed it gently in her hand. It brought me through difficult years. I want you to have it. Emotion filled Clara's eyes. I cannot take this. You can. Why? Naiche smiled softly. Because you matter to me. The words hung between them. Neither looked away. For weeks, they had danced around the truth. Now neither wanted to hide anymore. I love you, Clara whispered. The words escaped before she could stop them. For a second, silence filled the room. Then Naiche smiled. I love you too. Tears appeared in Clara's eyes. Not tears of sadness, tears of relief. At last, the truth had been spoken. Naiche gently pulled her into his arms. For a long time they remained there beside the fire. Outside, the mountains were quiet. Inside, two lonely hearts had finally found one another. But dawn was coming, and with it, danger. The next morning arrived faster than either wished. Apache scouts returned shortly. After sunrise, Edward's riders had entered the mountains. They were coming. Naiche gathered his weapons. Clara watched. Silently. Fear returned to her heart. Not fear for herself. Fear for him. Before leaving, Naiche stopped beside her. No matter what happens today, remember something. What? You changed my life. Clara struggled to hold back tears. You changed mine too. Naiche. He smiled one last time. Then he walked outside. Warriors waited among the trees. Together, they rode toward the valley, toward Edward, toward the final battle that would decide everything. Clara stood alone beside the cabin watching them disappear into the distance. She pressed the pendant against her heart. Then she whispered, prayer. Not for victory, not for revenge, only for one thing, that the man she loved would return home. Clara spent the longest day of her life waiting. From sunrise until late afternoon, she remained near the cabin, listening for any sign from the valley below. Every distant sound made her heart jump. Every gust of wind felt like a warning. She tried to stay busy. She gathered water. She prepared food. She cleaned the cabin. Nothing helped. Her thoughts remained with Naiche. As the sun slowly descended behind the mountains, fear began to grow. What if he did not return? What if Edward finally got what he wanted? What if the goodbye beside the cabin had been their last? The questions haunted her. Then she heard Hoofbeats. Clara ran outside. Several riders emerged from the trees. Her heart nearly stopped. Then she saw him. Naiche. Relief flooded through her body so quickly that tears filled her eyes. She ran toward him. Naiche jumped from his horse just in time to catch her. For several seconds neither spoke, neither needed to. He had returned. That was enough. Finally Clara stepped back. Are you hurt? Only a few scratches. What happened? The other warriors gathered nearby as Naiche explained. Edward and his men had entered a narrow canyon. There they found Apache warriors waiting for them. Long standoff followed. Neither side wanted bloodshed. Eventually Edward demanded to see Naiche. The two men met face to face. What did he say? Clara asked. Naiche smiled slightly. Mostly he shouted. That answer made several warriors laugh, and his expression became serious. Again, Edward wanted me to surrender you, and you said no. Of course. Naiche continued. Then Chayton presented evidence of Edward's crimes. Clara frowned. What evidence? Your letter. The one Edward wrote before the wedding. Clara stared in surprise. My letter. Your father kept a copy. The words hit her like sunlight after a storm. My father. Chayton nodded. He came to the meeting himself. Clara could hardly believe it. Her father had traveled into the mountains. To help her. Naiche continued. In front of witnesses. Your father exposed Edward's plan to steal the Whitmore land. Several of Edward's own men turned against him. Others simply walked away. Without their support, Edward lost everything. Clara listened in amazement. Years of power had disappeared in a single day. What happened to him? No one knows. He left alone. And for the first time since she met Naish, Clara felt truly free. Edward was gone. The threat was over. The fear that had followed her from Silver Creek had finally ended. The following week brought another surprise. Clara's father arrived at the cabin. The moment she saw him, she ran into his arms. Both cried openly. "I am sorry," Clara whispered. Her father shook his head. No. I am the one who should apologize. He looked toward Naiche. And back at his daughter. I was so afraid of losing the ranch that I almost lost what mattered most. Clara hugged him tighter. The old man stayed for several days. During that time, he came to know Naiche. He saw the kindness Clara had spoken about, the honesty. The strength. One evening, as they sat beside the fire, Clara's father smiled. "I understand now." "Understand what? Why you chose him." Naiche looked embarrassed. Clara laughed. A few months later, spring arrived in the mountains. Wildflowers covered the valleys. The streams ran clear. Life felt new. On a warm afternoon, Naiche led Clara to the meadow he loved most. The same meadow he had once shared with his late wife. The place where healing had begun. Clara immediately noticed something different. Several Apache families were gathered there. Children laughed among the flowers. Friends stood smiling nearby. Even her father was present. Clara looked at Naiche in confusion. "What is this?" Naiche stepped forward. Then he slowly knelt. A gasp escaped Clara's lips. The entire meadow became silent. Naiche looked into her eyes. "For a long time I believed my life was finished. Then I found a woman brave enough to run away from fear and strong enough to teach me how to live again." Tears filled Clara's eyes. Naiche smiled. "Will you marry me?" Clara laughed through her tears. "Yes." The answer came instantly. The meadow erupted with cheers. Naiche stood and wrapped his arms around her. This time there were no lies. No traps. No fear. Only love. Several months later, they were married beneath the open sky of the mountains. Friends and family gathered around them. Clara's father stood proudly beside her. Chay Tun, and the Apache warriors stood beside Naiche. The ceremony was simple. Perfect. As the sun set behind the mountains, Clara looked at the man beside her, the Apache warrior she had once feared, the man who had saved her life, the man she loved. Their journey had begun with a storm, a broken wedding, and a desperate escape. It ended with freedom. It ended with family. And most importantly, it ended with two hearts finding the home they had searched for all along, together.